In 1945, J. Robert Oppenheimer stood in the New Mexico desert and watched the most powerful weapon ever built detonate in front of him. He later said a line from Hindu scripture came to mind in that moment. "Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds." Within 10 years, the same government that built that bomb with his hands would destroy his career, strip his security clearance, and call him a national security risk. Not because he gave away secrets, not because he betrayed his country, because he had a conscience. And 70 years later, almost to the pattern, it happened again. Different technology, different decade, same playbook. And this time, the whole world is watching. Welcome to Atom Nation HQ. Today, we're going to tell you the story of J. Robert Oppenheimer, the most important scientist of the 20th century, and show you why what happened to him in 1954 is playing out again right now in 2026. If you haven't seen our video on Trump banning Anthropic, watch that first, link in the description. This video will make a lot more sense. Let's go back to the beginning. Robert Oppenheimer was born in New York City in 1904. By the time he was in his 30s, he was already considered one of the most brilliant physicists alive. He graduated Harvard in 3 years, got his PhD in Germany, became a professor at Berkeley. He was the kind of mind that came along once in a generation. Then World War II changed everything. In 1942, the US government recruited Oppenheimer to lead the most secretive and consequential scientific project in human history, the Manhattan Project. The mission: build an atomic bomb before Nazi Germany did. Oppenheimer assembled the greatest collection of scientific minds ever gathered in one place. Los Alamos, New Mexico, a secret city in the desert. Physicists, engineers, mathematicians, all working around the clock on a weapon they hoped they would never have to use. On July 16, 1945, the Trinity test, the world's first nuclear detonation. The blast was visible from 160 miles away. A mushroom cloud rose 40,000 feet into the sky. The shockwave knocked scientists off their feet miles from the explosion. It worked. 3 weeks later, the United States dropped atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Over 200,000 people died. Japan surrendered. World War II ended. Oppenheimer was a hero. Life magazine put him on the cover. He was called the father of the atomic bomb. He became one of the most famous men on Earth. But something had shifted inside him. He had seen what the weapon could do. He had watched cities vaporize. And when the US government began pushing for an even more powerful weapon, the hydrogen bomb, Oppenheimer said, "No, not no, I can't help. No, I won't." His exact words to the government were that the hydrogen bomb was a weapon of genocide and that building it would be wrong on fundamental ethical grounds. Those words would cost him everything. Here's what happened next, and pay close attention, because this part of the story will feel familiar. By 1953, a man named Lewis Strauss had become chairman of the Atomic Energy Commission, the government agency that oversaw all nuclear weapons development. Strauss and Oppenheimer had a long personal history. Oppenheimer had publicly humiliated Strauss at a congressional hearing years earlier, mocking his position on nuclear policy in front of colleagues and lawmakers. Strauss never forgot. In November 1953, a letter landed on FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover's desk, accusing Oppenheimer of being a Soviet spy. The letter was from a close associate of Strauss. The timing was perfect. America was in the grip of the Red Scare. Senator Joseph McCarthy was destroying careers across Washington by accusing people of communist sympathies. The political climate was one of paranoia and retaliation. On December 21, 1953, 4 days before Christmas, Oppenheimer was informed that his security clearance had been suspended. He was told to resign quietly. He refused. He demanded a hearing. The hearing lasted 19 days in the spring of 1954. Scientists, military officials, government advisors, all called to testify. Oppenheimer's past associations with left-wing organizations in the 1930s were scrutinized. His opposition to the hydrogen bomb was framed not as a moral position, but as a political liability. The panel concluded, unanimously, that Oppenheimer was a loyal American, that he had never leaked classified information, that he had served his country with distinction. Then they stripped his security clearance anyway. The vote was 4-1. The reason given: his opposition to the hydrogen bomb showed a fundamental defect of character. The government's position was essentially this: a scientist who questions the weapons he helps build cannot be trusted with access to them. Einstein, when he heard the verdict, said the AEC should stand for atomic extermination conspiracy. Werner von Braun said if Oppenheimer had been in England, he would have been knighted. But Oppenheimer was in America in 1954, and the government had spoken. His career was over. He was cut off from the work that had defined his life. He spent his final years in relative isolation, giving lectures, writing, watching from the sidelines as the nuclear arms race he had warned against escalated beyond anything he could have imagined. He died in 1967, still stripped of his clearance, never officially vindicated until December 16, 2022, 55 years after his death, when the U.S. Department of Energy formally vacated the 1954 decision. Secretary of Energy Jennifer Granholm called it a flawed process that violated the Commission's own regulations. She said evidence of bias and unfairness had only grown stronger over time. History had finally caught up with what happened. Now here's where the story connects to today, and the parallels are almost too precise to be coincidental. Anthropic was founded in 2021 by some of the most brilliant AI researchers alive, including CEO Dario Amodei, who left OpenAI specifically because of concerns about the safety of the technology being built there. They built Claude, and they baked 2 ethical limits into it. Claude would not be used for fully autonomous weapons, AI making battlefield kill decisions without a human in the loop, and Claude would not be used for mass domestic surveillance of American citizens. 2 guardrails. That was it. The Pentagon wanted those guardrails removed. They needed Claude for all lawful purposes. No exceptions, no carve-outs, no ethical limits imposed by the company that built it. Amodei refused. He said, and this is almost word for word what Oppenheimer said 70 years earlier, that allowing AI to make autonomous kill decisions without human oversight would be wrong on fundamental ethical grounds. That current AI systems are simply not reliable enough for that level of autonomy. That the risk to human life was too great. The government gave him a deadline: remove the guardrails or lose everything. He didn't budge. Within hours, President Trump declared that every federal agency should immediately cease all use of Anthropic's technology. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth designated the company a national security supply chain risk, a label that had never before been applied to an American company, a label historically reserved for foreign adversaries, for Huawei, for state-sponsored threats from China and Russia, applied to an American company for refusing to let its AI be used for autonomous weapons. The parallel to Oppenheimer is almost exact. Both men built transformative technologies for the US government. Both were celebrated and trusted while they were useful. Both drew a moral line about how far that technology should go. Both were punished not for disloyalty, but for conscience. And both were called national security risks by the very government they had served. But there's one crucial difference between 1954 and 2026. When Oppenheimer was destroyed, it happened in closed hearings. The scientific community protested. Einstein was outraged. But the public largely didn't know the details for years. When Anthropic was blacklisted, it happened on social media in real time. Trump posted on Truth Social. Hegseth posted on X. Hundreds of Google and OpenAI employees signed an open letter of protest within 24 hours. And the day after the ban, Claude hit #1 on the Apple App Store. The public didn't side with the government. They sided with the company that refused to let AI decide who lives and who dies. There's one more parallel worth noting, and it might be the most important one. When Oppenheimer was stripped of his clearance, the Soviet Union was already developing its own nuclear weapons. The government's response to a scientist with a conscience didn't slow the arms race. It just removed the most thoughtful voice in the room from the conversation. Today, while the US government is fighting with Anthropic, Chinese AI labs have already stolen Claude's most advanced capabilities through 16 million fraudulent interactions. They're building their own version, without any guardrails, without any ethical constraints, without any conscience baked in. America removed the most safety-conscious voice in the AI race. History rhymes. A court hearing that occurred on March 24th, a judge blocks the Pentagon's effort to punish Anthropic by labeling it a supply chain risk. In 1954, the government's decision took 68 years to be officially reversed. This time, the answer came in days. In her ruling, the judge made it clear she disapproved of the government's actions, which she said violated the company's First Amendment and due process rights. Subscribe so you don't miss what happens next. And I want to leave you with one final thought. The dissenting judge at Oppenheimer's 1954 hearing, the one who voted against revoking his clearance, wrote something in his opinion that has echoed through history ever since. He wrote, "It would be unwise, unjust, and dangerous to admit as a principle that errors of judgment in complicated situations can furnish valid grounds for indictments of a man's loyalty or character. In other words, a person who raises moral questions about dangerous technology is not a threat to their country. They are its conscience." 70 years ago, America silenced that conscience. Glad to see that with this ruling, history does not repeat itself, at least for now. Drop your thoughts in the comments. This is the kind of conversation this channel exists for. Hit the like button if this made you think. Subscribe for weekly videos on the technology and history shaping our world. This is Atom Nation HQ. I'll see you in part 3.